This is my review of Cities in Motion 2. I've played a lot of city building games. I like this one a lot. It has a lot of features that the other games don't have. One of the examples is the traffic, which is the automobiles in the game, are more realistic than a lot of the other games. So each car has a place where it's coming from, a source and a destination. And traffic jams can really occur because there's too many cars on the road, for example. Another thing I like about this game is you have different transportation options. You've got buses, trolleys, trams, metros, which are trains, boats, and you have monorails. And I use most of them, except I don't use the trolleys. I've used them in the past. Those are two of the big reasons why I like the game. It also grows on its own, so you don't have to worry about placing buildings and things like that. So now this game primarily is transportation based. You're going to build the network, the transportation network, to get people to work and back, and maybe to leisure activities. The transportation network includes all the buses, the trains, the trams, trolleys, etc., plus the highway system. I do like it better than the first version. I didn't like it at first. There's some things I don't like about the game. For example, this is the night mode right now. Actually, this is the day mode. It's kind of hard to tell the difference, and I don't really like the view, the coloring, and in the daytime, and it's even worse at night. So basically, I have a pretty large city, and I've built as much as I can, with the exception of in the mountains. Some of my city has a low density population, which is an example of where we're looking right now. But it will probably grow into higher density in the future. Here's some examples of where this used to be lower density, and you can see how it kind of mixed in. We've got some low density and high density that mixed in together, and it is based on the types of roads that you lay down. There's different types of roads, and obviously the thicker roads will give you higher density buildings. And the other thing you have to be aware of, you want to make sure you have sidewalks if you want buildings to populate in the area. If you put roads that don't have sidewalks, the buildings don't appear. So you might wait a long time for that sort of a feature and not have it. Now, as you can see here, I have on the map, I've got some routes highlighted, and these are monorail routes that I added. The monorail routes I'm using to do cross traffic above ground. I've got all of my metro trains underground. I'll show you my underground traffic. You can see here these green stations are my underground stations. And my train stations tend to be going north and south. I'm going to show you my metro coverage. It's not complete, but I decided to do mostly north and south, except for the bottom where it goes horizontal. Having completed the routes, it's very expensive. I do have the money to lay probably 5 train routes, and I probably need between, I'd say, 7 to 10 more in order to finish the map. But the good thing about laying the trains is that they bring in a lot of money. So now the monorails I'm doing for the east-west traffic. The monorails don't carry as many passengers, but the good thing about monorails is that you can fit them in on roads that don't have a lot of space. For example, I had a monorail that went on this road right here, going east to west, but due to a game crash, I lost my track because I hadn't saved it. Now, buses are actually, if you've played the game, buses are very flexible, and you can get a lot of good routes with the buses. Let me show you my bus coverage. Now, as you can see, I don't have complete bus coverage. The areas that are red don't have bus coverage, but almost the rest of the map has bus coverage. And the reason why you want buses is because you want people to have transportation. You don't want them to be completely abandoned. And the bus transportation is very inexpensive to implement. It's It's very cheap to plant a bus station. In fact, some of the stops can be a lot more expensive. I only put down the best stops. I'm going to show you an example of the stops. Usually you get a few different choices. You have a basic stop, a medium, and the more advanced stop. I usually put the more, in fact, I always put the more advanced stop now because I want to get the best quality service in my game. One of the tips that you can use to get a lot of money, you can use this for any video game. You want to put your game in a profitable status and then let it run overnight. While you're asleep, the game will make money. So that's one of the tricks I use sometimes to earn money, and sometimes it backfires. Sometimes you can come back to your computer and find out that you lost money. But usually the system works. Now for this game, you don't start out with complete coverage in terms of housing and businesses on the map. You have to add the roads in order for houses to appear, and I did it for most of the map. I even went up into the mountain areas, as you can see. I got some houses here up in the mountains, but not many, and they don't have bus traffic right now. There's also a few places here, open park areas, that you can reclaim in order to put housing and buildings, but I've chosen not to because usually you need this in order to put your bus depots and your monorail depots and things like that. So you probably want to leave those alone. Also, you're going to need them in order to put landmarks. Here's an example of a landmark, which is the Sydney Opera House. A lot of people go to the Sydney Opera House. I used to get tons of traffic jams. In fact, I told you about how I had a monorail line that I lost during a game crash. It went right here to the front of the Sydney Opera House and horizontally across, and there were always hundreds of people waiting to be picked up at the monorail. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to relay that monorail track. I'm going to show you a somewhat busy area. I'm going to pick this building. And as you can see for this commercial building, it says it's covered by, and it has 6 different transportation lines. You want to have as many options as possible for your residents because your residents have to get to where they're going as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible. So you want them to have lots of options. And the way I've routed my transit system is that it's up to the passenger to get off the bus and to get onto another bus. I don't share a lot of bus stops, which you could do if you wanted to. I'll show you an example of where I did do it. Here's an example. These monorails are being shared by many lines. As you can see, this monorail stop 114 has 2 different stops. I'm sorry, it has 2 different lines. Monorail lines 6 and 7 are both stopping here, while this one here on the left only has 1 monorail going through. So over here I did some overlay, and on the other stops I didn't. So in general, like I said, I expect my residents to find the next bus stop. But what you can do is you can overlap your stops so that more than one line goes to the same location. Let me give you another example. Over here, you can see this is the end of this line. The line that I lost fed into here, and they shared that stop. So, and it came from its own bus station. So it was a completely different line, and people could switch to this line just by getting off here, and they didn't have to walk anywhere. But unfortunately that line was lost. I'll probably rebuild it. I have enough money to do it, and it was popular. A lot of people were using the line. I have most of the lines turned off. The reason why I have these 2 orange lines turned on is because I'm currently working on getting that traffic. Now I'm going to show you some coverage. You can see that I've got almost the entire map with coverage because only this red area doesn't have coverage. This is the bus. These are trams, and trams are really good because they can ride on this center lane over here. I'll show you center lane. And by riding in this center lane, they don't have to worry about traffic jams. They can go right through the traffic jams. So here's one of the stops that the tram will come to, and it can bypass most of the traffic. There will be traffic jams, but far less than if you use a bus, for example. My metro coverage, again, I tend to run it all the way across the map. And it's very profitable. It moves people over long distances. The water bus only goes to these edges. So here's an example of where the water bus stops, this yellow area. And it's not as profitable, and people obviously don't use it as much, but it does allow people to go in a circular pattern around all these islands. And then there's my monorail coverage. In some places I left a few gaps, but over time I'll fill them all in. Now I'm going to show you some of the more interesting traffic designs that I've come up with. This right here is mostly similar to the default method, and the way the game comes with the highways, they're not done very well, and you should really improve on them. I don't have traffic jams. I haven't had traffic jams in a long time, but I certainly have lots of road traffic, and the reason why I don't have traffic jams anymore is because I made better designs for my traffic. Now this is an example of a very easy and an inexpensive design that uses very little space. On the left over here we've got a highway going out and highway coming in. On the right we've got normal road. The underpass is normal traffic, and we've got the on-ramps with the bus support. So I haven't seen this back up in a long time since I've made the changes, and notice that it doesn't go to the lower level. So if these vehicles want to go to the lower level, they can't. It allows them to go to the east, which doesn't have highway. It's not necessary because the highway wraps around right over here. There's no reason for them to go that way. So this was an addition and a change to the original design, which I'm sure you can see if you load up the same map on your game. Now over here you're going to see a more intricate design. I was having a lot of traffic jams over here, and the way I fixed it was by making service roads. So if you look over here, you'll see that cars get off on this road, and from this side road they can take an exit down to the main road. They could take another exit to the east side highway. They can merge with traffic that was coming east, and they can go around this loop and head west on the western highway. And not only can they get off of the service road, but vehicles can get onto the service road. So here's an example where you have highway traffic from this single lane that merges in, and you've got the road level, the surface road traffic that merges in, and the service road, and they all merge together back into the highway right over here. So adding service roads makes a big difference, but doesn't entirely resolve traffic problems. You're going to see on this side I did not use service roads. You see an off-ramp and an off-ramp, and over here you have two on-ramps. Actually there's three that merge together, one from the surface, one from the east highway, and this one is coming from the western highway. So on the right side we've got a service road, and on the left side we don't. But I do use service roads more frequently. We're going to come across them frequently in the map. Moving up, and this is, again, I replaced the original highway with more lanes. Here's another example where we've got a east-west highway crossing my north-south, and it comes back onto a service road. And the service road makes all the connections to the east-west highway, to the surface roads, and things like that. And not only did I do that, but I'm pretty sure that the service road, as you can see here, it goes all the way across the water. So the service road reduces the traffic on the highway, on the main road. And I've also got an underground road. You can see over here that there is an underground road to bypass the upper highway. And the underground road only makes a few connections to the upper highway, which allows it to have more capacity, fewer traffic jams. And I also added this pedestrian bridge. And you might think that the pedestrian bridge is a waste of time, but actually it makes a big difference. The pedestrians actually do use it. Now again, as I mentioned, you're not going to see a lot of traffic on my maps, and the reason why is because I fixed all the traffic problems. In general, most of my intersections you can go any direction that you need to go and get to the surface. Some of them can't do it. I'm going to show you some of the more interesting designs that I came up with. This right here is one of my busier intersections. What happens is the westbound traffic comes around and over the ramp and heads west over the bridge, and it ends up becoming a traffic jam, but you won't see it until the rush hour traffic returning home. I get another traffic jam over here on this road. I had to smoothen out the curve so that the traffic ran as smoothly as possible, which meant that the main highway thinned out. Like originally it went into the main highway, and the main highway connected, the southbound traffic connected to the westbound, but I changed it so that the westbound just continued through, and I thinned out the southbound traffic, because what's happening is traffic is coming from the northern island into the southern island and then over to the west. Which is why this is the heavy trafficked road, and it goes to that Sydney Opera House. And I would get tons of traffic over here. I had to put a one-way, four-lane road over here on the side. I had to put this major intersection over here just to handle this immense amount of traffic that was coming through here. I'm going to show you another interesting design that I came up with. Over here, I needed traffic that could go on these small roads, and the only way to do it was to put two-lane highways. So I had to put these two-lane highways to allow the traffic to come through. And there was another part, which is over here, where I actually made one-lane highways right next to each other. Unfortunately, it was lost during a crash of the game that wasn't saved. The game does not have an autosave feature, so it's something you need to be aware of. So I'm going to show you some of the interchanges that I did. This right here is a monster interchange which had a lot of traffic coming through. Most of the traffic is heading north, and a lot of the traffic was going west. It was causing major traffic jams. This is a north-south against east-west interchange, and all of the traffic can switch to whichever direction they want to go to. And I tried to smoothen out the curves. I used to actually have a traffic circle over here, and the vehicles could get on and off the traffic circle whenever they wanted to. However, it didn't really work out. This is a traffic circle design that I came up with. Obviously, it's not perfect, but this allows anybody to get on and anybody to get off, and the traffic can go in any direction that they want through this traffic circle. Here's another traffic circle that I made, which is a little bit smaller. You can see that the traffic can turn around in this circular area, so the traffic can go in whichever direction they want to. It's not a highly trafficked area, so that's why I'm able to get away with this. I'm going to show you another traffic circle that I did, which goes around the neighborhood. it is in this area right here. So basically this traffic circle is done through the east and westbound traffic. The cars can go through the neighborhoods and turn around if they want to. And it used to be heavily trafficked until I added a lot of connections. You'll notice I have a service road over here, and I have another service road on the other side. Ideally, the service road on the northbound traffic should have connected all the way through. But I didn't make that connection because, like I said, I don't get a lot of traffic anymore because I fixed the flow. Now, this is another design I came up with. It uses a square method. Some of these roads are actually not highways, but regular traffic roads, and that's the only way to make the connections. And I had one bridge over in order to increase the flow a little bit. So, for example, the southbound traffic, he can go and turn around and get onto this little circle here. This is the actual circle right here. And this goes down to the lower level, and over here you can get up onto the upper level from the lower level. So that is one of the smaller, cheaper traffic circles that I made. Let's look at some of the designs for transit. You want the buses and your trains to be able to move in and out as quickly as possible. You might see them bunching up sometimes. You check the date, because if it's a Saturday or a Sunday, you're going to have less buses going out. They start to back up, and you shouldn't worry about it if it's on a weekend. So if you see your buses in a big line and it's on a Saturday or a Sunday, don't worry about it. The problem usually goes away on its own. What I did here was I made multiple routes coming in and out, and I tried to go over the intersections as much as possible. And not only that, but you're going to see that there's an underground bypass over here. This underground bypass allows it to bypass two intersections. And the reason why I did this is because the vehicles were starting to line up in a queue formation, and it causes traffic problems. It was blocking buses from getting in and out and things like that, so I had to build bridges to get around it. And you have to do it with more than just buses and trams. You also have to do it with the monorails, and you have to do it with the trains. Now here's a more complicated one I did with the monorails. These two left rails are coming in, and these three are going out. And the reason why I did this is because the station has a lot of lines running that were quite busy, and they were starting to back up. And I also had to make the incoming line, it used to branch off right over here, but I had to feed it through over here, and it actually sneaks in underneath. You can see this line, it's over here also, and the line sneaks in under so that it doesn't block the trains that are going to the other stations. There's two other stations here. So I was getting a lot of traffic over here, and that's the way I solved that. This is a perfect example of how you want to bridge in order to prevent blocking a route. This station has 4 lines, and some of them go to the west, and some go to the north, and some go to the east. But what happens is the traffic that's going to the east, which is this line 5, I will highlight it for you. On this route here, what's happening is when they take this lower level, they can wait at the station and block traffic from entering the depot. So what I did was I made a bridge. I'm going to show you what the bridge looks like. I made a little bridge over here so that when they're waiting at, for example, this stop, they're not blocking this lower rail, which allows trains to continue to enter the depot. It's something that you have to do with all of your transit. You should even do it with buses, and you can do it either by adding a station, or you can also do it by adding a waypoint. And a waypoint is identified by a circle on the map. If you go here, you'll see that I used a lot of waypoints. Here's some waypoints right here. Like I said, depots are very cheap. So as you can see, I placed a lot of depots over here, some of which I haven't used yet. This is a very complicated entrance. The philosophy is that all the vehicles come on this wide curve, and it's a 4-lane minimum. So they come in on a lane that is appropriate for the depot that they're headed to. For example, the rightmost lane is going to go to the first depot, and the second lane will go to the second depot, etc. And the idea is that they come in front of all the depots and then they exit. But I changed the road so that they could get in and out more easily with, for example, I've got a bridge over here so that they're not blocked on the way out. So I did make some changes, but it's still the same philosophy where they come in on one side and they exit on the other. And I made some changes. For example, on this one, they could turn around, including the buses, and they could bypass, they could cross over this intersection. They have an elevated road here, and the elevated road allows them to get past a lot of intersections. It used to be always backed up over here, and it would block buses and trains from coming in. But now now they have 2 lanes to exit, and as you can see, your trains don't have to run in the center. They can actually run on the other lanes too. So in this case, I put some of them on another lane because it was a lot of traffic over here, and it allows them to continue flowing. And I put in another dedicated line over here, which allows them to bypass under the bridge. Because what you're going to find is that you're going to have a lot of traffic jams where the expressways cross over your local surface roads. So that's why I built that bypass. And you don't have to do it over the road, you could do it under the road. As you can see, this road right here goes through this tunnel. It goes under the road right here. And I have another one that's visible over here. So I do take advantage of roads underground as much as possible. You can put your entire transit system underground if you want. For example, you can use a feature which is a pedestrian street, and you can put your trams on the pedestrian street. You could probably put your trolleys on the pedestrian street, your monorails. So you can build pedestrian streets under the city, and you can have all of these vehicles bypass your main roads. And the good thing about it is you can put the stops on the pedestrian street. So you can make a tram line that goes underneath your entire city, and all the stops are under the city. And the pedestrians will use it, and they will find the stops, and it definitely does work. And you just occasionally make a connection to the surface road. I've also read that these red trams can run on the metro track, which is something interesting. One thing that I do is I try to make not direct connections, but I try to connect the different transit systems to other transit systems as much as possible. Like, for example, with this orange line, I made it go from the west to the center island to the small island over here, all the way to the right, so that people that want to go across have that option. Otherwise, you get all these bottlenecks on these main roads. I'm going to show you an example, which is this area right here, where we have a lot of different transit systems all going through the same area. We've got 3 depots for buses and 1 for trams, and we've got the subway. And basically all of these people are within walking distance, and they're all at the edge of town, or what was at one time the edge of town, until I started expanding south. But what you want to try and do is find those intersections. Here's an example of one. We have this stop over here for the east-west traffic, and we've got this stop over here for the north-south traffic. You want these to be as close as possible. An example is probably going to be found on another line. Here's an example where we've got a stop for the east-west traffic, which has a lot of people, and we've got a stop for the north-south traffic, and the people that get off on the stop could easily walk. It's a short distance, half a block, and they can get to the tram on the surface, and they can get to the metro. So we've got a lot of options here for people that want to transfer from one place to another, to switch between east-west and north-south. So building those as close to as possible is very important. Another thing that you can do, which I did in another game but I have not done in this game, is you can actually make these bridges into double-decker bridges. You can build one bridge. For example, you've got this bridge right here close to the bottom of the screen. You can put another road right on top of it, heading in the same direction or the opposite direction. And I didn't do it in this game because I haven't had the need to do it. I've been doing a better job of resolving traffic issues. Traffic interchanges, you want to have either a short little triangle like this to connect between the traffic, or you have to have a circle which allows the vehicles to do an interchange from one to the other. Now you've got these buildings called landmarks. I paid for one of the upgrade kits. Some of them definitely bring in people, and some of them I don't think as much. Let me see if I can find my other landmarks. Probably over here. This one doesn't bring in as many as the Sydney Opera House, but I definitely have seen large numbers of people heading for the landmarks, so I would say that it's worth buying, considering that they're approximately $2 and sometimes available cheaper. This one has not been as effective. It's probably because it doesn't have good transportation going to it, and it's something obviously that I need to fix. One of the biggest problems that you can have in the game is when you have a short off-ramp and a short connection to get to the next on-ramp. And this is actually a fairly long connection, but if these highways had been right next to each other and the off-ramp and the on-ramp were right next to each other, you could have a lot of problems. And this is an example of where it will happen. Over here, you've got an off-ramp that goes under with an on-ramp, and they don't have a lot of room. So what happens is a lot of cars cannot move through. Only a few cars can move through at a time, and you end up getting a lot of traffic jams. And usually when that happens, the only solution is to get rid of the off-ramps and the on-ramps. You can see here you can also place bus stops on the off-ramps and the on-ramps. Here's an example of where I did it. This bus, believe it or not, is only running on the highway. And you can see it is denoted in blue, and because it's only running on the highway, it gets to where it's going a lot faster than if it was going on the surface road. And I put bus stops at all of the off-ramps, which can be good and it can be bad. I'm going to show you a little bit about how to place bus stops. I've seen people do it wrong. Over here, you're going to see that I place my stops right near the intersection. So this stop is located right here, and I don't place them halfway. You want it to be as close to the intersection as possible. There was a problem with the original version where if you were too close to the intersection, the front of the bus would go into the intersection and block traffic. I haven't seen it in this game. But the reason why you want the stops to be there is because you might end up with a lot of buses waiting behind it. and you don't want them to block the intersection behind them. So if you put a stop in the wrong spot, like here's a place where it could happen. This stop right here could only have perhaps 3 buses behind it. Once you get a 4th bus, it will block the intersection. The AI is not smart enough to prevent that from happening, and it can cause traffic jams. Now, as I told you, there was a time when I used to get a lot of traffic. Not so much anymore because I fixed the traffic. One day I had traffic jam everywhere in the city, and I followed the traffic by going backwards to try and figure out, right, or in the opposite direction. I followed it forwards to see what was causing the traffic jam, and what happened was there was one car that caused a citywide traffic jam, and that's was obviously because of a poor design. Now here you can see it's is it 10 p.m.? It's 10 p.m. on Monday night. This is the traffic that's returning home. They're coming from the Northern Island, and they're heading to the landmass on the west. And my goal right now is to try and figure out how to reduce this traffic. And the traffic jam will show up all the way up the island here. The only way to do it is to make sure that your merges are done correctly. And I'm going to show you an example of a merge, which is right here. Here's a merge. The problem essentially is that all the cars want to be in this right lane because they're headed to the Sydney Opera House. So the cars that are coming from the east are going into that right lane, and it's blocking this traffic from merging in. It's one of the most difficult merges that I've had to deal with. Usually a 3 and a 2 lane road merging into a 5 usually is no problem. But in this case we do have that problem because of the Opera House. One of the ways that I alleviated it was I tried to make more than one way to get to the Opera House. As you can see, there is an off-ramp over here, and then there's another one over here, and I had other designs which don't exist anymore, which brought the vehicles down there. You can see there's another off-ramp over here. But essentially, they're all going to the same place. I get that traffic jam right in that spot. I need to come up with a solution to keep that traffic moving. Over here, what I did, because there was a lot of traffic getting into this merge, I actually made the off-ramp 5 lanes wide. The vehicles start out by going in from a 2 into this 5, and then they merge back into the 2, and it holds more cars than it could before, so it did reduce. I haven't had any problems since I made that change. I'm going to show you another basic intersection design. There's a few different ways to do this. This is a little extension that I made to the road that allows me to make the on-ramp and the off-ramp so that it matches both sides on the coastal area. And as you can see, I tried to make them flat so that the road is actually a bridge and it's flat, and some of them are not. Some of them dip down a little bit, some of them dip up. Here's an example of an opposite design where instead of the road going under the highway, it's going over. There's an advantage to that because there's no middle intersection. The one on the right has an intersection that the vehicles have to deal with, and the one on the left doesn't. It does not connect to that lower road, and it connects deeper into the city. This is actually an underground highway right here. You can see the underground road. So what this was intended to do was to drive these cars into this underpass. It didn't really work. And my philosophy, my belief is that it's possible that there is a preferential treatment for expressways, and vehicles avoid the standard roads a little bit more, which is probably why they're not taking it as much. But there's also another philosophy you have to understand is that certain things that you buy, such as roads, don't have a maintenance cost, or the maintenance cost is really low. So once you pay for the road, you get a lot of value out of it. You can lay as many roads as you want that you can afford to, and you don't have to worry that you're going to go into debt because you have too many roads laid down. Usually it's the same is true with buses and trams, uh, but you do have to be careful because you can have routes that are unprofitable. I've had a few, but I'd say 99% of the time I don't. Another thing that I do is that I feed a lot of the traffic deep into the city as much as possible using the highway system. And I will show you an example. I've got this expressway bridge that goes in front of the Sydney Opera House, and it goes all the way across the West Mainland with all of these different on-ramps and off-ramps. And sometimes it gets to be busy. You can get a lot of cars on this little road over here. But what it does is it keeps the traffic off of the street. And if I didn't do that, what would happen is I would end up getting big traffic jams right here at this intersection in front of the Sydney Opera House. It would have a long line of cars. So what I was able to do by building this highway is reduce the large traffic jam over here. The traffic flows a lot more. Over here, this is one of the exceptions. Normally, I take the expressway and I extend it straight across, but for some reason, this one I did a block higher, so I had to make this T-shaped interchange. I had to make one over here, and I had to make one up over here so that the traffic can take that highway. And as you can imagine, the further you go north and the further you are from the city, the less traffic you're going to have. So you don't have to have the wide lanes in the extreme parts of the city as you do more near the center of the city. The original on-ramps and off-ramps that come with the game are kind of large and they take up a lot of space, so I shorten most of them. Some of them work out well and some don't. This is I try to keep the road straight. This is an example where it's not quite straight, a little bit of a curve to it. You want to have more on-ramps and off-ramps than the game includes. As many as you can get, basically. For example, this area, there were no on-ramps and off-ramps at all. And I have not added any yet, but I'm sure I will at one point. The other thing that you can do is you can add, obviously, as many bridges as you want between the islands, which will improve your traffic flow. As I said before, this is a standard road. It has an advantage in that the trams can cross those roads. Here's an example of a road that has trams crossing it. The tram lines can also be placed on the expressway. You can do it there too. But over here they get their own dedicated line and they'll never have cars in their lane until they get to the intersection. So sometimes I did have tram lines, which is more important in the beginning of the game when you have less money. But it's not as good for the automobile traffic. The few things that I would not waste my time with is that it sort of makes sense that you'd think, well, to make a road that goes all the way around the island. But what usually happens is a lot of that road does not get used. For example, I have a section here that goes around the island and there's never traffic on this road. You can see from these percentages 3%, 2%, 1%, and those numbers are very low. Doesn't get a lot of usage. And the same with things like the trams. I don't see a lot of usage usually on the transit systems that go around the edge of the islands. I'm not saying not to do it, I'm just saying that it's not a moneymaker. The other thing that you need to be aware of is that it can be difficult sometimes to knock down buildings because it takes a long time to get the buildings, and here's an example of where some of the buildings had to be knocked down in order to build these on-ramps and off-ramps. But you have to do it. If you don't do it, you're going to have traffic problems. The other thing you can do is you can build this highway underground, and if you build it underground, part of the on-ramp will be underground and part of the off-ramp will be underground, which means that you'll actually have more space for buildings if the highways are underground. So if the highways are above ground, you lose a few buildings. That's one of the advantages of underground highways. As you can see over here, we've got a couple underground highways. One of them is right over here, and so we get this extra building that we would not have had before. And there's probably one over here also. Well, no, there's not over here. But you can see this is a perfect example where we gain a building, which is that one right there, the library, because we have an underground road as opposed to an above ground road. That is most of where I've gone with this game. As you can see, my reputation is only halfway. I haven't completed all the routes yet. I will probably complete them at some point, which basically means